Like, if he was like Prince of 2 of the 7 Seas, you'd be like, that's pretty impressive. Freaking 7? Anyway, it really actually literally got to me. I was like,
blew
man.
your 4-year-old mind.
Yeah, it did. He was like, this guy's, he collected all 7. Hey, Internet. It's Paul. It's Matt. The Dork Lords. We're here talking about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, featuring Namor, the Submariner.
Yes, one of the longest Marvel titles ever.
It really is. It's great. Very informative. The only way that I wouldn't have enjoyed this movie is if they'd killed off Namor. He lives, therefore, awesome movie. Well, we'll talk more about that in a second. But no, I did enjoy this movie. Before we launch into different aspects, Paul, what are your overall thoughts about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever?
I enjoyed it, and I had, trepidation before watching it, but I think I just wanted to lower my expectations.
Okay.
I think I heard that people were responding to how the movie treated the death of Chadwick Boseman, and all reports that they had treated that well, so I didn't have any fear of that. But I think the trailers were fine, but what was in the trailer didn't necessarily make me feel confident that I'd enjoy it, but I did enjoy it.
For somewhere after Endgame, we did a video with contributor David Dalt, and we were talking about the future of the MCU. Now, the pandemic was looming and all that kind of stuff. But in that talk, we were like, well, who's going to be the new face of the MCU now that Endgame has kind of put the ending arc for Iron Man and Captain America? And my thought was Black Panther. I mean, that seems like a kind of a logical progression, perhaps, to the next phase.
Interesting.
Well, shortly thereafter, we got this terrible news that Chadwick Boseman was terminally ill. He passed away. And so it's, you do see that here on the screen. Ryan Coogler, the actors, these are all people that worked intensely with him for a long time, and they were feeling that grief, and they decided, you know what, we're not gonna recast. We're going to play this death into the MCU. And yeah, I mean, you could have made other choices, but I appreciate where the place this choice came from. It was like, you know what, we're legitimately feeling this grief. Let's put it on the screen. And so I think that was a bold choice to make. Right down to the very opening. So the opening of the film comes, and T'Challa is dying, and Shuri is trying to recreate the heart-shaped herb in order to perhaps save him. And the film's like, we're not going to show you Chadwick Boseman or T'Challa because we don't have the footage, and we're not going to pretend that he's here and blah 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 blah. Which they could have done. They could have done some. They could have figured something out, right? Could have deep faked it or something. But I think in their minds they were like, it just feels wrong. It just let's. You know what? We're going to have him pass away from an illness. They don't even talk about what the illness is. But basically, this is Chadwick Boseman. It's kind of what they're saying. It's Chadwick Boseman. He is the guy who has just passed away. And we are just, associating that with the Black Panther. And so, with that in mind, I think it really did add to the power of this film. There were a lot of, when they're showing the new graphics, the Marvel intro with all Chadwick Boseman, no music.
Yeah.
Like, you could hear a pin drop in the theater. I mean, and it was a full theater, and it was just like, oh, wow. It was this eulogy for Chadwick Boseman, and it was very effective in that way. As I say, they could have made other choices. They could have recast him, could have whatever. But I like the choice they made, and it felt there was some integrity in it, and the actors played their part in that as well.
Yeah, I think I'd seen somebody talking about how once you're making a project, you become a family. And so, and it was such a high. You saw, the first time that Black Panther trailer was released, and the cast saw it for the first time, and then with all the praise and attention that they all got when the movie was released. So it's not hard to imagine that they actually did feel a sense of loss and being in that project. It's like Letitia Wright, she, it's interesting that she took on that accent for the part, but it's not like she could do it all the time. When she was out of the part, she didn't associate that. But I'm sure when she's doing the part and everything, and that's what she's supposed to feel a sense of grief. I don't think it's, hard to imagine that
Right.
every single one of them had that.
And I feel like this movie is really her journey in a lot of ways. It's Shuri's.
Yes.
As my wife put it, my wife suffered the loss of a loved one at a fairly early age, and she really identified with Shuri's journey in this, where she was going through stages of grief. We see her, with her anger, wanting to burn the world down. Her bargaining, right in the beginning, she's bargaining like, Bast, I don't even believe in you, but you know what?
Yeah.
We could talk if you could just help my brother. She goes, obviously, sadness, denial, and then this acceptance really in that last end credit scene where she finally burns the funeral garb to say, okay, I'm moving on with my life now. It's really incredibly, people applauded. That's always like, I always think that's a mark of an effective movie. You're applauding a screen, and obviously the actors don't know. Well, thanks, appreciate it.
They don't.
But people feel this spontaneous urge to say, I like that so much, I'm applauding. And so, yeah, I got that. Like, the audience applauded. It was very moving in that way. With that as your baseline, this movie was effective. And so yes, I had some issues with some of the parts, moving parts in this thing, but with that underlying theme of coming to terms with the loss of a loved one, it knocked it out of the park. I mean, it really did. So for me though, I know like there's everyone that has a YouTube channel, anytime there's any hero that comes out, they're like, that's my favorite hero, and you're like, blah, 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 blah. But no. Namor is legit my favorite hero of all time. To see him in live action for me was just amazing. I never thought I'd see it. Like, whoa, what? And it was convincing and great, and the actor did a great job.
Now, that comes primarily from your watching the cartoon.
Correct.
So did you ever read the comics?
I did. And but not. I wouldn't say I was like, must read every single issue of Namor comics. But I read some of the comics. But you're right. What really drew me in was little 4-year-old me in an army base in Germany watching Saturday morning cartoons, and there were 3 cartoons that I specifically remember. They came back to back to back. There was Namor, Submariner, Thor, and then Mighty Mouse. And those were the 3, and it was like, these are my favorites. And I ran around with this little plastic hammer, and I'd throw it off the wall all the time. And,
wow.
But
I don't remember hearing about, but
Namor really got me.
Over Thor.
Yeah. Yes, even though I had a special place for Thor, Namor, something about the way, like, there was this really cool intro graphic thing where they would say, like, the Submariner, Namor, Prince of the 7 Seas. And you're like, all 7? What? Like, if he was like Prince of 2 of the 7 Seas, you'd be like, that's pretty impressive. Freaking 7? Anyway, it really actually literally got to me. I was like,
blew your 4-year-old mind.
Yeah, it did. He was like, this guy's, he collected all 7. He was like, amazing. And he would leap out of the water and he would come back. I'm like, how does he even have the strength to like freaking do all that? Anyway, little wings on his feet. I was all for it. Loved him. And now, obviously, that Namor was ruler of Atlantis and had this Roman influence, hence Namor, Roman. His catchphrase, Imperious Rex, which, interestingly, the film did keep his catchphrase, even though he's now, has a Mesoamerican influence. Loved the twist on his name. Namor, Namur, no love. I like it. That was really creative. A good twist. I visited Chichen Itza back in the day, the Mayan temple complex.
Oh, okay.
And it's this Mayan site that pays homage to Kukulkan and Shak. Right. And water was incredibly important to the Maya of that region.
Interesting.
Chichen Itza can actually be translated as well of the water sorcerers. Like, oh yeah.
Okay.
So associating Namor with Kukulkan and water. Fabulous idea, really, honestly.
Okay.
Somebody had some really cool thoughts on this thing, and it was great choices. And I saw a lot of imagery that I saw at Chichen Itza reflected in this Talocan culture. There's this bit where they're playing the Poc de Poc game. There were a lot of different little cultural references that I thought were really effective, and so top marks. I loved their depiction of Namor, so I'm all on board. And I'm so glad they didn't kill him. Yay! He's a good guy. He's gonna be hanging out with the Avengers and be like, hey, what do you guys want to do next?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah.
The jury's out on that.
The stronger association with Namor. I mean, he had a sizable connection to Black Panther. That's true, but certainly earlier than that, though, with the Fantastic Four. So it'd be surprising if they hadn't thought of that introduction having some meaning. But it's not been alone, with him. He's had interactions with countless other groups, and so, yeah, it's not a surprise to me that they didn't kill him.
And we get to see that he is very long lived. So even in this incarnation of him, he's been around for hundreds of years. So basically the backstory for that culture, the Talocan culture, and Namor in particular, is it appears that a second meteor or a chunk of the meteor that hit Wakanda brought vibranium to this spot, landed in the water. That vibranium affected the local flora, much like the heart-shaped herb was affected by vibranium. Here you get this underwater plant that is affected by vibranium. The locals, find it, turn it into a drink, and when they consume it, that the effect is, as opposed to the heart-shaped herb, the effect of this aquatic plant on these folks turns them kind of into aquatic beings. And then on top of that, Namor is the son of one who has already taken the herb, so he's actually been affected in utero, I guess. And so
which makes him technically a mutant.
Right, and he says the word. He says mutant in the movie, so it's like, oh, all right, they got the rights, they can do this.
Yes, they can do the rights. I mean, I'm not, even though that's how it is in the comics, I'm not. I don't know. It's weird. They haven't established what that means for the MCU, so sort of piggybacking off of how it was established in the comics, and of course how it was established in the X-Men. But they haven't really. Even though they've shown Professor Xavier, they haven't really specified what that means in the MCU in terms of being a. So it's kind of hard for me to think of him as being a mutant since he's human. The other people in his society all became a part of the sea at that point. So it's interesting that they're establishing mutant in this aspect in which he still has a connection to his human past.
But you're right. I think it's still ambiguous. It's just a term. It's a term of art in a way, and it's not.
Yeah.
I also enjoyed the political unease that they showed with the UN versus Wakanda. Yeah, they've got vibranium. Other folks want it. That line. So we know Everett Ross apparently used to be married to Val. And her line where she's like, basically, she'd love for the U.S. to be the only ones with vibranium. I go, okay, man, that's probably true. So that all was kind of good little political intrigue going on there. So the end credit scene is we meet T'Challa's son, who seems too young to be a hero anytime soon. Although, I went to another dimension and now I'm twice the age. But
what with the years between movies, though? Who knows how soon it'll feel once he's of age. I mean,
that's true.
It's interesting the fact that they felt a need to keep it a secret.
Being who they in the movie, or you mean like the movie makers?
The movie makers.
Okay.
It's interesting that they decided that presumably in the future he'll be vying to be the next Black Panther or whatever. I mean, right now they set it up though where Shuri's the Black Panther, but she's not the king
Right.
or queen. That was one thing I kept saying, like, princess. I mean, isn't she the queen now? Because the queen's dead. So, you'd think you'd be like, okay, let's change this to queen.
Really?
M'Baku's like, Princess Shuri's not here.
Right.
I'm
Good
gonna,
point.
challenge for the king, to be the king of Wakanda or whatever.
Default. He wins by default. No, obviously they had an agreement. But yeah, so yes, and he obviously comes off as a very competent ruler. He's the one that kind of talks Shuri down from the ledge a little bit. I think at least attempts to say, like, look, do you want to have like an eternal war with this other group? Maybe that's not the best idea for our people. You have to be thinking more about the entire culture now that you're like leading this thing, as opposed to like, I want revenge. So I liked that input from him on that. Generally, the action scenes were pretty good. I didn't really care for the robot designs. The robot designs kind of threw me off, admittedly.
Okay.
I get it; it's an aesthetic choice, but they both the Ironheart suit and the Midnight Angel suits looked a little goofy. Like they looked a little like Power Rangers, Nickelodeon, or something. I don't know. It just didn't look right to me somehow. But
I mean, given the size of Riri, to me it makes sense that her outfit would be different. And I think it looks closer to how it looks in the comics.
Gotcha.
So I didn't have a problem with her, and the, what is it, Midnight
Angel?
Midnight Angel costume, which apparently, which you can guess is probably going to come back once they start doing the one of the.
There's the Ironheart
spin-offs.
Series as well, yeah.
But there's supposed to be spin-offs too that.
Right, good point.
Ryan Coogler is supposed to be making, so I'd be surprised if that didn't come back in that. And certainly they've always talked about Okoye being one of the people, and
right now she's now a civilian.
I'm sure they could do one for Nakia as well, or have them both in a show.
Right.
But that would be a thing that they could do to sort of distinguish that. So personally, I didn't have a problem with that, but
it just looked a little jarring. It didn't seem to fit the Wakandans versus the people from Talokan, and it was like, okay, and then suddenly there were these kind of goofy looking robots as well. You're like, okay, the goofy robots is one step too far. No, I don't know, but anyway, it wasn't a deal breaker. It wasn't like, oh my god. But it was just like, okay. Some choices are better than others. You and I had talked before we started recording, and you had brought up a good point, which was the central conflict of this movie is like what to do with Riri. Should we kill her or not? Namor wants to kill her off, and obviously the Wakandans object. And I think you had brought up, like, would killing Riri solve the problem? And I think the answer is no. Like, you kill her, then they can't ever build the tech again to find vibranium. But she gave her project to a professor, who then apparently gave it to the government.
She didn't even know that there was a device that was made from her work.
Right.
So obviously they were able to take her work and
make it
weaponize it, or not weaponize, but implement it. So make it into technology as opposed to merely theoretical work.
So in other words, it didn't just exist in her head. It existed
exactly.
in a disk somewhere or a flash drive, several
flash
flash drives.
Yeah, I guess you could argue, but I think I wanted to hear that argument that symbolically it would mean something, right? Like, where it's like, okay, we don't want you to have this tech, so we decided to eliminate the source of it, even though you might decide to use it. They could say, okay, well, we're starting with her, and then where's the engineers that worked on it? Could you let us know where they are? What? No?
So all we need you to do is just sign off on killing this girl, and we'll be good. Okay, I guess, you know what? It's a high price to pay, but we're willing to pay it. Kill the girl. Great. All right, now anyway, here's another list. We have these engineers, and we got the professor, and we got, which I think was the point that was made. Like, was it M'Baku even made that point? Somebody made the point of like, well, why would you think this would be the last thing they ask us for? Like they're going to just
make
it demands.
Well, it's a message to the world, even if they want the Wakandans to implement it. Even if they decided to kill her, I think, and be allies of the Telecon, I think that still would have, just I think the rest of the world would have seen that as something. It's like, okay, yeah, we send somebody to find it, and you guys take the scientists who came up with it and kill them. That's an act of war.
That's an act of war. Yeah. No, definitely. So, but yeah. Anyway, point being, Namor's solution didn't sound like much of a solution. I guess it's not going to save you guys. All you're basically doing is just making Wakanda have to choose the value of life, but it doesn't really solve anybody's problems.
No.
Thanks.
Yeah, no. It seems like the way it was designed was almost to cause conflict.
Yeah, it was, or just like a test of loyalty or something. Yeah.
It's like, you could certainly, they did a better job than Wakanda of being, hidden. Of course, they were beneath the ocean.
Right.
So, but it's interesting that they didn't decide, like, okay, well, why can't we do it like them? Oh, you've come to this area. Well, this is our area. You can't come here. And if you do, then we'll act against you.
Yeah, his strategy was basically, once we're found, we'll just kill everybody who finds us.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, and they're still hidden in terms of the world, right? There still was nothing that caused them to be outed.
That's a good question. I guess you're right.
I guess
I said a lot of people know about them now is the thing, right? I mean,
do they?
I mean, a lot of Wakandans do.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. But
and the
are they
Wakandans
telling
are,
the
for
rest
instance,
of the world?
Everett Ross has now been rescued by Wakanda, so he's probably going to be staying in Wakanda.
Or perhaps they're measuring exactly how further to take Namor's story by not really only revealing it to the Wakandans, their presence. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then, so we leave off with, Shuri makes a choice not to kill Namor when she has the chance. He has a weakness. He has no weaknesses, Paul. He has no weaknesses. No, but his weaknesses.
I think the comments even had the fact that he couldn't stay away from water for too long.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. He dehydrates. He starts to dry out. Anyway, so Shuri uses that fact to defeat him in combat, but then doesn't kill him, which obviously echoes back to her brother and how he spares Zemo. Zemo killed his dad, and he's like, you know what? This is just going to propel more killing, so I'm not going to do it. So she honors her brother's legacy in that way. And so then we leave off with Namor basically going back to his people, saying, look, we're done. We're not fighting anymore. And then he says, look, eventually Wakanda's going to get in a lot of trouble, and they're going to need our help. And we'll be their ally in that situation. And so it's kind of one of those, like, is that a good thing? Are you saying that as a bad thing? I can't tell which. I think he's saying it as a, like, hey, we'll
of course. No, I think he respects, what they've done.
Yeah.
And, you could wonder whether or not that was his plan all along, to force them to sort of get involved to the point where it's like, no, we really are protecting them and we're willing to fight for that.
Right.
And but also creating, deciding the basis of their alliance, which is that, they could be damaging to each other, but together they can fortify against the rest of the world. So,
and obviously, the reason Shuri is so outraged at Namor is that he killed her mom.
Yes.
And pointedly did so. It wasn't like, in the heat of battle, there are casualties. Like, no, I'm going to kill you if you cross me. He perceived that he was crossed, and so he killed her. Like, okay, all right. Well, in that case, so the fact that Shuri is willing to forgive in that moment, obviously, it takes some moral fiber to be able to look past that. And she does. Yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I don't think it's like the top of the top tier, perhaps MCU, but I think it's in the upper echelon. I'd say the top third of MCU movies. I don't know, somewhere in there. What are your thoughts?
I I tend to agree. You know, I liked it better than most of the movies in this phase, with the exception, I guess, probably of Shang-Chi. I like Shang-Chi better than this.
Maybe Spider-Man.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's yeah. In a way, if it weren't for that, those three movies, I guess, really, I would have a lot less positive things to say about.
Yeah, right. There's been
this particular
hit and
phase
miss
of the MCU.
For sure. We'll be back talking about the last two episodes of Andor. We may even be doing like a little season coverage of The Peripheral. Thank you as always, Paul. Appreciate it, good sir.
No problem.
And we'll talk to everybody next time. Bye.